So, we're halfway through the general election campaign, 3 weeks to go. And this programme, BBC Breakfast, has invited the leaders of the UK's 7 main political parties to speak to us here on the sofa.
And we start the first of these interviews with Nigel Farage from Reform UK with us on the sofa this morning. You're very welcome here.
Good morning.
This morning. Thank you very much. So we had the debate last night, of course. Can I just ask you first, you're a very young political party in historical terms. Can I get your assessment of where you think you are, 3 weeks away from polling day?
We're very young, indeed. I mean, the Brexit Party I founded in 2019. Once we left the European Union, we rebranded it as Reform. But I'll be honest with you, we weren't ready for this general election. I mean, we very much hoped it would come in the autumn. It's been rushed upon us. I hummed and hawed as to what to do. I finally decided I'd come out of retirement and have another go. So it's remarkable. I mean, I've been back as leader this is day 11. And if you look at the Times newspaper today, you'll see in the YouGov poll, we've overtaken the Conservatives, we're lying second, albeit with Labour at the moment some way ahead. So we've had a phenomenal start.
You'll understand we are duty-bound to say that is one poll, and that as it stands, one poll, but it is...
It's still pretty remarkable.
Yeah, but it is one poll. Can you take us through that next step then? So you are understandably looking at that poll and seeing it as a clear moment in the election campaign. What do you think that translates to in terms of your showing, in terms of MPs come the day? Because as you well know, there is a big difference between claiming yourself as the opposition to Labour right now and actually becoming the opposition to Labour in an official sense, in the terms of the number of MPs you might win.
No, you're right. I mean, we have a completely outdated electoral system. It's not fit for purpose, but it is what it is. Back in 2015, when I led UKIP into a general election, we got 4 million votes and 1 seat. I mean, never before had anybody got so many votes for so little reward. But we're looking this time at many, many more votes than 4 million. We're hoping to get through the electoral threshold. Whatever we do, we may not get the number of seats we deserve, but are we going to win seats in Parliament? Yes. How many? There's 3 weeks to go. We've got momentum behind us, and there's 3 long weeks to go.
Well, you must know, Nigel Farage, from your team and the work that you do, you must know what your target is now, given where...
I have no idea. I have no idea. All I know is this. The Labour Party are massively ahead in the polls. The Conservative Party have not bounced one little bit in these first 3 weeks. They're not going to. And my message is very simple, that Starmer's going to have a very big majority. I don't think he has much of a plan. His 6 priorities didn't even mention legal migration, which is a huge issue. So I want us to become the opposition voice in Parliament and in the country. That's the ambition.
But you must have a target for seats.
I've got no idea.
Why not? You're the leader.
Because I'm travelling optimistically.
But, OK, but people...
I have no targets.
If you say you're going to be a credible opposition, or you want to be a credible opposition, you will need seats. So how many...
We're going to win seats. How many, I don't know. If this momentum continues, at the moment, we're rising 1% a day in the polls. That's been pretty consistent over the last 10 days. If that continues, who's to say?
Big if, isn't it? You talked about migration and the issue of migration. Plaid Cymru leader, who we're speaking to in about an hour here on the sofa as well, as part of our leader debates, has said the tone of the debate on immigration had to be changed. This was in one of the debates last week. Do you recognise that some of the language you've used before and members of the Reform Party have used around immigration is divisive and inflammatory?
I don't think anything I've said is inflammatory. What I've said is that for 50 years, we had net migration into Britain of 30 or 40,000 a year. That from the late 1940s right up until the millennium. That now, under a Conservative government, net migration is running at 750,000 people every year. For example, we have to provide a new home every 2 minutes in this country just to deal with net migration. I've argued that our infrastructure is crumbling. I've argued that our health service can't cope.
I do want to kind of clear up figures. Where did you get every 2 minutes a new home is created for a migrant?
A migrant a minute comes to Britain. a migrant a minute comes to Britain. In fact, it's actually more than that, but in simple terms, a migrant a minute comes. We have never...
How many migrants are you saying come to Britain?
Well, 2.5 million have come to Britain over the course of the last 2 years. In fact, 1 in 30 people on the streets of Britain today has come in the last 2 years.
Now, that figure, I will say...
Which is extraordinary.
That figure, we have fact-checked that figure, and that figure takes a look at the people who are coming in and hasn't accounted for the people who have left.
A migrant a minute is net, but the gross figure is 2.5 million people.
1 in 30 is not net, is it?
And here's the thing. Half of those that have come aren't coming to work. They're coming as dependents.
Where did you get that figure?
52% that have come as dependents. We've even allowed 125,000 people...
Who in the future could work, yeah? The children don't come over here and not work, do they?
This is making us poorer. It's very interesting. Everyone says we need net migration for GDP, the size of the national cake. Actually, GDP per capita, per person, has fallen for the last 6 consecutive quarters. A massive influx of unskilled labour has driven down productivity, but intolerable pressure...
Productivity was an issue long time before migration
and it's getting
became
worse.
A political issue.
And it's getting worse. So look, all I'm arguing is common sense. We're living through a population explosion. We can't cope. It's making us poorer, and our living standards are declining as a result of it. And by the way, I'm all for people coming into Britain and British people working abroad. I'm all for it. But the scale on which this is happening is appalling. And for the Conservatives, it is a complete breach.
What's appalling about it?
The fact that young kids can't get houses, the fact that rents are up over 20% over the last 3 years.
You're blaming migrants
I'm blaming the population explosion. It's as simple as that. The Conservatives promised in the last 4 manifestos to reduce the level of net migration. In fact, in 3 of them, they promised to tens of thousands a year. It is now 750,000. That is a complete breach of trust with the British public. And the Labour Party, Keir Starmer yesterday, set out his 6 priorities. This wasn't one of them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about a breach of trust, and trust has become one of the very key elements, maybe more so than previous elections this year. You're involved in this trust issue too. You're sort of step aside from the debate, but given your role in the Brexit vote, which was won, and the promises that you made alongside the existing government at the time, you know, there were lots of people making lots of arguments, but you were knee-deep in that about what would change if we left the European Union. And it hasn't happened. And you were one of those telling us what it would be like. And it hasn't happened.
Well, let's fact-check this, shall we? What I said in the referendum is we would be in charge. And whether we got things right or got things wrong would be down to us. Now, there was a reasonable expectation that we'd tighten up border controls and that fewer people would come. That is why Brexit passed.
To be fair, do you not think that people listen to you as a politician, as a campaign? Well, you weren't a politician there, you were a campaigner. Yeah. And do you not think they listened to you and the message they got with this would be different? And it hasn't been different, and therefore that puts you in the same place as those politicians who said
I wasn't in charge. If I'd been given responsibility for making Brexit happen, it would have been very different.
But that's an easy get-out. That's a bit like where you are now in Reform, where you're saying, I'm not in charge.
In 2019, right, in the general election, I stood aside in over 300 seats to give Boris Johnson a free run, to get Brexit over the line and to deliver the promises that he made. The reason on migration that Brexit has failed in the eyes of many people is because the Conservative Party haven't delivered. But be in no doubt, we are in charge of these things. Brexit gives us self-government. That doesn't guarantee success, but it does mean we're in charge.
One of your candidates, Erin Crawford, has said that she'd like to hear you talk more about more than immigration and taxation, for example.
Yes.
Hear more. And your party has promised to raise the tax-free personal allowance. It's currently around £12,500, just over, to £20,000. One of the things we've been trying to do is get firm numbers from all the parties, full costings. How much will that cost?
That is an enormous cost. It's about 50 billion, but it's also very imaginative. As we all know...
What is that? Sorry, imaginative. What do you mean by that?
But it's not the kind of thinking you get from the others, because they stick with orthodoxy. One of the big problems we've got is we have more and more people, young people too, living off welfare. and it's costing us over £100 billion a year. What we want to do, and there's a trap here, you see. You're on benefits, you go back to work, you work more than 16 hours a week, the tax kicks in, you may as well stay on benefits. There is a terrible trap.
So hence the rationale to raise the tax threshold.
Absolutely.
That 100 billion, you say, is that from young... Do you say that number's from young people not working? So that's
that is
the
the
whole
benefits
on
bill.
the benefits.
However, since the pandemic, a growing number of young people are saying they've got all sorts of psychological problems, but they're also not incentivised to go to work. We want to get people back to work.
I understand that. So the 50 billion, where will that money come from?
A lot of it will come from the racket that is going on. The government has been creating money, particularly during the pandemic. That money goes into the system, it goes into banks, the banks lodge it with the Bank of England, the Bank of England pay them interest on it. It's a racket. It's a racket.
Well,
and an increasing number of economists and academics say that alone could save between 35 and 40 billion pounds a year.
So only another 10 billion to fill. And that, we've spoken to the IFS, or taken a look at the IFS, looking at your proposals for changing the Bank of England's function. And that is a very difficult and long process. That is very technical. That would not happen immediately.
Well, no other central bank in the world does this. This is a complete racket with the banks. And interestingly, you know, Paul Tucker, a former Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, fully endorses our plan, as do a growing number of economists. But look, I'm going to launch, and by the way, I won't call it a manifesto, because the word association with manifesto is lie. I'm going to launch our contract on Monday, where I'll lay out all of the costings of our plans. All I can tell you is what we're doing is bold and imaginative.
In the front page of Reform website, as it stands, and I know it's not a manifesto at this stage, I'm not quite sure, do you call it a pledge? I can't remember.
No, a contract.
A contract.
This is what we will campaign
The contract, it says you'll set out your reforms in the first 100 days, is what it says. And you then go to say it's produced with advice from independent economists, think tanks and advisors. And a moment ago you said you're not about conformity. That just sounds like everybody else. Every other political party would say, we talk to independent advisors, we talk to think tanks. You just sound like everyone else.
I've been called many things over the years, but not like everybody else.
Well, no, I'm
not.
quoting from from Reform. That's what you said. It doesn't sound radical. That just sounds like you do the same as other people. You talk to think tanks.
I've just outlined some very radical proposals. Equally, we don't think anybody should pay inheritance tax until the estate is worth £2 million. We want to lift the VAT threshold to help small businesses. I promise you, what's coming on Monday is very, very different.
You have a freedom, and you must recognise this, given what you previously said about how few MPs, even you, think you will get relative to the Parliament. It could be a big jump for you as a party, but relative to the Parliament.
Well, we'll see.
It gives you a freedom to say stuff, doesn't it? That you're not going to have to back this up and say we couldn't do it.
What I'm saying is this. We have a Labour Party that's won already. The election is over. We all know that. Your viewers all know that. Their thinking on economics, on all of the key issues of our lives, is actually remarkably similar to the Conservative Party. I'm arguing that for democracy to work, governments need to be challenged. And I think I'm in a far better position to do that than either Ed Davey from the Lib Dems, and Rishi Sunak won't be there. But the Tories are so divided, they don't stand for anything. This is about... I mean, look, we are completely in the grip of big corporate businesses. That's who the politicians listen to. I know that from 20 years in the European Parliament. There are 5.5 million people out there, men and women, running small businesses, acting as sole traders, that frankly are having the most difficult time. I'm on their side, and I'll fight for them.
Our time is short. Can I ask you about your comments about Rishi Sunak? And I think I'm quoting you right to say that you said about him, this is following D-Day.
Yeah.
So to put it in context, that was the moment when he left early and has been criticised. So you said he doesn't understand our culture.
He doesn't, no.
Can you explain what our culture means? Right? So you're looking at him as in, you're representing a group of people looking at him saying he doesn't understand our culture.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't know where the centre ground of opinion in this country is. Look, Rishi is Winchester College, Oxford University, Goldman Sachs. He has no connection with working people in this country at all. To whom, by the way, what happened 80 years ago is something to be immensely proud of. And the point of... And I was there voluntarily. I wanted to be there. The point of it was to honour those last remaining remnants of that generation that did those remarkable
Can I be clear? You're
things.
saying
He
his
didn't understand it.
his previous job means he doesn't understand the culture. I mean, you were a trader yourself, weren't you?
Yeah, I wasn't at Goldman Sachs working in a back
To
room.
most people out there, that won't make much difference.
I can
You were a trader,
assure.
weren't you? I mean,
I get on
I'm
with
not
people.
sure I understand the difference.
I get on with people of all backgrounds, all classes. Rishi Sunak lives in this very, very narrow little world.
You're a very
like
wealthy
so many
man.
politicians.
You are a very wealthy man also, are you not?
No, I'm not. What compared to Rishi Sunak? You having a laugh?
Compared to the average person, you
Yes,
are,
I am,
you
but
are a wealthy man. So
I'm
to
able to
categorise
connect.
wealth as
I'm
being
able-
disconnected.
He is disconnected in every way.
When you say he doesn't care about our history,
Mm.
our culture, and I started by asking you about the power of language, are you able to say honestly that you don't see that that is divisive? You are
Why?
placing him as the other,
He is.
not
He
as
is.
the other.
He is.
And
He's a different
the colour
class.
of his skin comes
No, he's
into
British
this.
born, for goodness. Don't forget, 40%.
Our culture,
hang on
our
a second.
history.
Hang on a second. 40% of the contribution in 2 world wars came from Commonwealth countries. There are plenty of people here who've come from families that came from the
Indeed, and
Commonwealth
yet
who fully understand this. He doesn't, and that's part of the problem. Our politicians are disconnected.
His parents came over here and contributed
Rishi Sunak
to this
is British born.
contributed to this economy. Surely he'll understand that.
Too many of our ruling class have no connection with the culture of this country, don't understand what people's problems are, don't understand what their aspirations are, and I'm telling you that I do.
Can I ask you, do you think then that you are more patriotic than the other party leaders?
Without a doubt.
What's your evidence for that?
D-Day. D-Day does it for me. I mean, it's very interesting.
I did say
Keir
the other,
Starmer-
sorry, I did say the other party leaders.
Yeah, I'm
and I'm
coming
putting
on.
you're here as a party leader. We will
Yeah.
be speaking to all the party leaders. You are sitting
do
here
ask
saying,
Keir Starmer.
hold on, let me just finish the question if I may. You are saying you are more patriotic than any of the other party leaders who
I
are
believe so.
standing in this general election. On what basis?
I wouldn't take my poppy off out of embarrassment because that's what Keir Starmer did last year. Please ask him when he's here why, at one point in the morning, is he wearing a poppy, and at another moment, speaking to a Muslim community, he takes the poppy off.
And that is your evidence for saying you're more patriotic.
I reckon that's pretty strong, don't you?
We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank
We
you.
will be speaking to all the party leaders. All have been invited to join us on the sofa here. Nigel Farage, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time this morning.
Thank you. Nigel's going to join Nikki Campbell, our colleague on 5 Live Radio, from 9 o'clock to answer your questions. And, of course, you can listen on BBC Sounds. You can watch it on the BBC iPlayer as well. Now, if you have a question for Nikki to get to Nigel Farage, you can text 85058.